Hello and welcome to another episode of the Foundations podcast. I am 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 and today I have 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗏𝗏𝗏 as my guest. Jen is someone I met through my best friend and climbing partner Matt about 3 years ago. And for the first little while when I met Jen, I actually just kind of in my world referred to her as Matt's girlfriend. But I met her around a time when she was starting on really stepping into her power. And since then, she's become a lot more than Matt's girlfriend. She's become a friend, an ally. She's become a community leader. She has also become part of my family. And she's also really become a teacher to me. So on this podcast, we had the opportunity to talk about a whole bunch of different things. We talk about death and how death can be really used as a tool to really awaken and to live presently in our lives. We touch on stepping into our gifts and living a life of service from using our gifts and a whole bunch of other things as well. But Jen is really a humble leader, and she is someone who reminds me and many people all over this community every day that we are whole, and we have an opportunity here to look into our shadows and to reclaim all the parts of us that may have been forgotten. So I really hope you enjoy the podcast, and let's get into it. Hiya, Jen.
Hiya, Brad.
𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, that's correct?
That's right, Bradley Samuels.
Yes. You have been a friend, a teacher, a best friend's girlfriend. I live with you.
Took me a long time to just be your friend and not Jen or Matt's girlfriend.
I think I put you in my phone as Matt's girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Is that what I wrote?
Yeah.
And then you caught me in the phone?
Yeah.
You were like, that's who I am to you?
Yeah.
What did you write me down as in your phone?
𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 problem.
That one hurt. Was the first time I met you, was that at fire ceremony? Your first fire ceremony?
Yeah, my birthday, I guess it would have been 3 years ago. Yeah, it was my first fire ceremony that I ever held in here. My first one was when I went back home and held it with a few friends and mostly unknown people.
And for anyone listening, what is a fire ceremony?
A fire ceremony is an opportunity to build a relationship with the element of fire, because it's a really great transmuter of energy. So it's a way to let go of stories and narratives and really change the page on those things that are binding you. And so it's a way of releasing old patterns or habits. And like you can do it with anything, but with working with that energy or that element is it's a more tangible way to actually create those transformations and those shifts. So it's held in ceremonial space. We sing medicine songs, and we hold each other in doing our work together.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
It from that first ceremony with you, where just changing the narrative of how I look at fire and its purpose and role, it's definitely evolved a lot. Now it's such an ally, because I just feel like it does the work for you, and just trusting it to do the work for you.
Yeah.
But I have you here on this podcast today. Welcome to the Spiritual Wealth Podcast, where we talk about, it seems like, just what spirituality is to different people. What is the spiritual path? And I've talked to many people now about why I've even started this. And it really started with my pursuit of freedom. And I kind of pursued it through business first, like the traditional wealth and freedom through business entrepreneurship. And I didn't really find exactly what I was looking for. And it now has pushed me seemingly into the yogic path, is what I'm finding out. And you own a yoga studio here in Squamish. Yeah. You're a teacher to many, including myself. And your path, what I think you said earlier at breakfast, you feel spacious within, you're actually doing a lot of stuff in the community, and yet you feel spacious. which is a far cry from what I saw you maybe a few years ago, because I've seen you a lot throughout the journey.
Yeah.
That was not how I don't think you would describe yourself. And as of this morning when you told me at breakfast, it dates back all the way to when you were very young, and feeling like this place that we call reality is not exactly it's not the peaceful place. It's not the safe haven. And you don't say that anymore today. So it's kind of been a journey of a transition of your narrative.
Yeah.
And what we are and who we are.
Yeah, for sure. And why we're here.
Yeah. But maybe you could we could take it back all the way to those early memories of, how did it start for you? Early memories in life.
Yeah. I think where we were talking about that was the contemplation on death and the other side, and that I brought up. My earliest memory of not wanting to be here was when I was a kid, probably. It's hard to place memories when you're a kid, but I would say 2 to 4, maybe 3 or 4. And I just remember being in my living room and being like, this life is not going to be easy. Like, this physical existence is not an easy one to be in. And then just having memories of being on the other side and wanting to go back to that, like feeling like I was torn from this unity and this love and this bliss and thrown into here. And I'm just like, this again? And
this again, even the way you're wording it. I've been here. Why am I here again?
Yeah. And yeah.
So that implies reincarnation.
Yeah, I think I had a sense of that when I was pretty young, and then just wanting to go back to the other side, and even just like, how would I do that? How would I, and it wasn't that I had a terrible childhood. I didn't, but it was just knowing that, like, being embodied is challenging. It's not an easy life, and it's the world of duality. But I remember just being like, well, I can't leave because my parents would be very upset. So, but yeah, I remember like plotting how I would even do it at that age. And like I said, it's not because my life was terrible, but I just had memories of the bliss of the other side, and wanting
I could make it really easy real quick if I really wanted.
Yeah. But not really.
Right.
Yeah, like learning as my path has evolved, I think, you're confronted with challenges, and that's so that you grow. And I think you're constantly going to be confronted with those challenges until you choose to grow past them. So there's no really escaping them.
No. Do you think a lot of people really look at it that way? These challenges are here for my growth. That's like a very almost optimistic outlook.
Yeah.
It's all here for me to grow.
Yeah. I think you do eventually. I mean, maybe. I think, like when you hear a lot of people's stories and hitting rock bottom, it's like that's where there's that cracking open, where there's a willingness to learn again and a willingness to grow from that. And I think sometimes it takes that level of pain or that level of things being taken away from you so that you're open again to evolving and growing. And then looking back, it's always when you look back, you're like, oh, well, that created the opportunity for that growth. But we do naturally give ourselves a lot of resistance to grow. I mean, we go to the gym. It's not fun, at least not for me.
Depends what you're doing, but yeah.
But yeah,
people do it because you should, because it's good for you.
But you're challenging your body so that you can grow and become stronger. So I think we do have that understanding on many levels, but to apply it to life too.
Yeah. I've never hit rock bottom myself, but I imagine if you're hitting rock bottom, one of the probably thoughts is like, I'm still here at the bottom. So at some level, there's something inspiring about that. Yeah. I'm not dead. I'm still here at rock bottom. So it's all up from here. Exactly. And I think that's the willingness happens there, because you're like, okay, well, here I am. Nothing can get worse than this. So I'll try. Whereas if you're at the top, it's anything. Like I could lose it all. Yeah. And sometimes when you're at the top, you stop being, what is the top anyway? But yeah.
you stop being willing to learn because you think you know everything. So then I think that's when you start getting spanked a little by the universe because you're like, I know it all. And you're just like, really? Okay. And then I think you just have to keep being willing to learn and grow.
Yep.
Yeah,
one of the things that really stood out to me that we've talked about a lot, and it stood out to me because it was a dominant theme in the few years I've been pursuing the spiritual path, whatever that is, or contemplation. One of my dominant contemplations was death. And when I met you and realized, and you spoke of it in that way, it really excited me, just really excited me.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure where to start with that, but death as a tool for expansion and enlightenment, really. And even at breakfast this morning, we spoke of death there's an interchangeability or a synonymous nature to death and the truth of impermanence. And when we ease into that, there's a lot of grace and it's good for us.
Well, I think you just really awaken to life when you are able to sit with death and accept it as the truth that we're all going to die at some point. Part of us dies, I think.
What is death?
I think death is birth. It's the cycle. You're dying in one way to be reborn in another way, and death is just transformation, really. It's not, to me, it's not an end. Because I think there's part of us that does die. This physical body will have its expiry date and it'll get reabsorbed. But even in that, the living energy of our body gets reabsorbed into the earth and feeds other life.
Actual biology.
Yeah. And so even that doesn't really die. It doesn't just end. It just gets reabsorbed and transformed. So really that's all death is a transformation to another chapter. I mean,
is anything dying then, or is everything getting absorbed, right? Even our personalities move through the memory of other organisms. Everything is kind of just, did anything actually die, or did everything just actually transform?
I guess it depends on your definition of death. But if death is transformation, then it just, that's what it is.
Do you think a lot of people even look at death that way? In the I Ching, in Taoism, the only law in Taoism is the I Ching means change scripture. The only law is change. Which could almost mean the only law is death. Or movement or transformation. So in some ways it's they're all kind of just different perspectives at the same law. Yeah.
There's a lot of overlapping truth when you look at all the philosophies, and that's what I find fascinating is if this philosophy from this part of the world came to the same conclusion as this part of the world, then there must be a truth that they're tapping into. But I think in the West, we don't really contemplate death. It's become more of a taboo. And so we fear it. And then it becomes very painful and we resist it. And I think resistance is the root of suffering, really, is a lack of acceptance. But when you can accept it and soften into it, and I think it creates this opportunity to actually be more alive every moment, because it's not going to last. It's not going to be here forever. And just every moment is arising and passing, and it's this fluidity. And so if you think of a wider scope of just time on this earth, for example, there's this passing through of human incarnations, and it happens in a blip of a moment when you really look at the wider scope. So we're just here for a moment, and it seems a long time when we're here. Life is long and short. But it's not permanent. This existence, this embodiment isn't permanent. But I guess in my philosophical background is that there is part of us that is changeless, though. And so how do you touch that part? And then when you can touch that part and identify more with that part that wasn't born, that doesn't die, then it kind of gives you this access to just enjoying life where you are, and
How would you describe that part? I know it's not describable, but your best attempt at describing it.
Yeah, it's hard to describe. It's like, I think it's that recognition of that wholeness that's inside of you, that's also inside of all living beings. It's that living energy that that's the same that is growing the tree outside, or the blade of grass, or the new child being born. It's that same living energy. It's not unique. It's not your personality. It's just the living energy, the light that's striking inside of you. That's the same in all of creation. And that's the undercurrent that weaves through all of reality. And that it takes like a higher perspective to really touch it or define it, or it's hard, but it is hard to grasp at. But it's...
How often do you touch that place, would you say? Are you able to touch it daily?
Yeah, I think I try to live from that place, and to, like, when there's challenges coming up, and often the challenges are resistance to change.
Ironically,
yeah, like everything's changing, and then I just wanted to stay the same because I got comfortable there. But everything's changing every moment, and but yeah, just like to be able to sit in that change and accept it, because I just come back to me and this part that's here to experience this life, that's here to experience the textures that life provides. And like in Patanjali's sutras, there's Prakriti and Purusha, and Prakriti is everything to do with matter in the material world that's always changing, but Purusha is this essence, this source. And I've come to understand it as the changeless. But that Prakriti, this world of material or matter, exists so that Purusha can experience itself. And so it's kind of that, it provides that mirror. And the whole practice of yoga is to calm the mind, which is kind of like the waves on an ocean or a body of water. And when it's wavy, you can't really see a reflection, but once you've calmed it, then you can see the reflection. Yeah. And then the mind can actually reflect to the intelligence, or the Purusha, the source, what it is.
So it can see itself properly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what we're talking about right now is, yes, philosophy, but like, it's also, you're speaking of yogic texts and scriptures. How long have you kind of been on the yogic path? When did the yogic path start for you?
I guess it would have started probably 10 years ago. And it's hard to even pinpoint. It's like, when did you start the spiritual path? It's like, when did you start? When did you identify with it, really? Yeah.
It's like,
well, when I started...
Of course you started eternity ago, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
how many lifetimes ago?
More so, I think, when did you like step into like bringing conscious awareness to like, this is the path of awakening. I'm on a path of awakening.
Yeah.
And how has that even shifted over a decade of being on it? Like, maybe even some of the beliefs that had no longer dominate your conscious experience.
Well, I started yoga when I was just at home doing yoga videos at home. And I think...
You were watching them?
Yeah. And I think I guess I probably would have started yoga more for the physical benefits. And then I started in a climbing gym that offered yoga. And I think it doesn't really matter why you start. When you step onto the mat, something does change and shift, even if it's just more mindfulness, just bringing attention to the breath. Even if the teacher isn't teaching about why or what it does, it has an effect. And but then I met my teacher, Christine Zelda, and when I met her, I went to one of her yoga classes, and she was talking about all the philosophy, and like, you've experienced her classes, and there's just something different. But you can tell that she's actually embodied it. Like, there's a lot of people who talk about the philosophy, and it's great that they're talking about it sometimes you can tell that they haven't quite embodied it yet though and applied the practices. But what I felt in her presence was like she's actually living it. And so I wanted to learn from her. And her program is called the Shamanic Yoga. Her institute is called the Shamanic Yoga Institute. And then I took the Shamanic Yoga teacher training. And she has the medicine wheel, which we can talk about a little bit too, combined with the teacher training. So these shamanic practices that come from Peru and mountain shamanism, and then overlapped with these philosophies of the East with yogic lineage. And then that was just, the overlap was fascinating. And like I said, like when they come to the same conclusions, you're like, okay, well, that's got to be true then, because they're independent.
Yeah. I love it when that happens.
Yeah.
When you see things that are like totally independent. There's all these amazing historical sites all over the world that had no relations.
Yeah, exactly.
And they just have the same things like carved in the walls and like.
Yeah. Or like that they're positioned like a computer chip is positioned.
Oh man.
Yeah. Anyway. It's insane how energy works. Yeah.
Yeah. And then now that you've done all that, you've encouraged everyone in the community to do all that. And now you run the yoga studio, and the one you just mentioned, the medicine wheel, has been a really amazing experience for me. Even same synergy, or not synergy, but synchronicity. All the archetypes in the medicine wheel align with the ayahuasca retreat that I've been going to years before I did the medicine wheel. And now in my mind, all those things came back. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. I remember all the paintings, and I'm like, oh, there's the jaguar, there's hummingbird, there's serpents all over the place, like also aligned with the exact same lineage in maybe its own way, or maybe exactly the same. Not sure.
Yeah, they're a little bit different because mountain shamanism doesn't really use entheogens. Their power or their wisdom is sourced from the mountains, and more I can't say more from nature, because ayahuasca is also from nature. But the ability to get into altered states of perception isn't necessarily from substances that you're taking. Yeah. But there's definitely a lot of overlapping, like you said, archetypes. And, it evolved from Peru. They both came from Peru. So it's just, and there's even today, like there's a lot of overlapping. Like you can go sit with an 𝗟𝗢𝗫𝗁, who's a person from the mountains, and some of them do serve ayahuasca. So it's, and I think that's just like, sometimes we try to stay so pure in a lineage, but it's always melting. It's always shifting. It's always, incorporating things that we learn. And it's hard to really like keep a thing the same. I think that's actually what was nice about it. Yeah. Is that maybe it's not exactly the same. Like you said, one is sourcing from the mountains. One is I'm not even sure where it's sourcing from, but sourcing through ayahuasca. The jungle shamanism is, yeah. But when I kind of realized I'm in because I didn't know anything about medicine wheel before I started on the journey. Right. And then seeing all the synchronicity, I'm like, oh, how convenient and beautiful. Yeah. Right. It's not this whole other thing. It's like, oh, my worlds are coming together, and that feels really actually peaceful and nice. Which it did. Yeah. And even the painting I have in my bedroom has all the archetypes on it. Right. And I was like, oh my God. I think it has a parrot. It has a parrot too. Yeah, it doesn't have eagle, but it has a parrot. Yeah, it doesn't have eagle, it has a parrot. Yeah. And then there's a hummingbird, and there's a serpent, and there's a jaguar. Yeah. But what is medicine wheel? How would you describe it best? I think medicine wheel, it's a series of initiations that are designed for you to come back to your wholeness and to reclaim the lost or the forgotten parts of yourself, or the disowned parts of yourself, the parts that you don't want to look at. But when you're disowning a part of yourself, and oftentimes that's what shadow work is like going into those parts that you might have guilt around or shame around carrying. But until you accept that as part of you, you're not really operating from your wholeness. And I think it's, accepting that you are human, and you are going to have some shadow, you are going to have some light, Anytime there's light, there's a shadow. That's part of life. So medicine wheel is really, that's how I would describe it, is for you to come back to your wholeness, to come back to your sovereignty, to come back to your sense of agency that you have choice in this life.
For you, what were the core, like, in the South where we deal with our core wounds? You mind sharing what yours were?
I think what I said is probably more personal to me, yeah. But it was not having a sense of agency in my life, of losing my personal power and, and giving it away. And I think we give it away a lot. Sometimes we give it to teachers by putting them on pedestals, or, when we go along with something that we actually don't want to go along with, or we're not speaking our truth, then we're giving our power away. And what I learned from being with Chris is the way that she teaches is really giving you your power back. And
is that rare in teachers, do you find? Or is it she's just gifted at that?
Yeah, she's really good at that. Like, she's really good at just trying to dissolve the hierarchies. And like, yes, a teacher, you want to learn from them because they're further down along the path, so you have things to learn from them. And it's not to like take away, it's not to not be humble in their presence that you can claim your own power, but it's that it's not recognizing that, or it's recognizing that they're not any different from you. They've been on the path a little bit longer. But that, again, like that recognition that we all have this innate intelligence within us. And that's why you can't have this sense of inferiority or superiority wherever you are in this journey. Is you're at that point in the journey. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing inferior about you if you have somebody that that's a little bit further down the path. You learn from them.
Right. And it goes back to like that whole, what is the path in the first place? How do we know what's above and below?
Totally.
Right. We have to we're the only ones who can frame it. Who's winning, who's ahead, who's behind, who's early, who's late. It's all part of our own inner framework.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, that's been actually one of the most important integrations is I for business, it was winning and losing, getting out of that paradigm.
Right.
Because that's the North American way. There's winners and losers.
Yeah.
Whether it's investment, whether it's business, in like trying to compete. But that paradigm keeps you in this trying to get somewhere attitude.
Yeah. And
it's very different once you exit that framework, because then there's just business for the sake of business, if you want to.
Yeah. If
you really enjoy the process that you're experiencing.
Yeah. And it's not losing if you're learning. There's always something to gain. But I think just being too, like, the concept of once you have this, you'll do this and then you'll be happy versus just being happy. And then you're inspired to do something and then you'll have whatever. But it's just a bit of a mind shift, right?
Sometimes a big bit of a mind shift. Yeah. All right. I want to bring it back to death.
Bring death back to life.
I want to bring death back to life in this conversation. And the reason I want to do it is because I still had more questions. I don't know if you became a death doula, but you kind of started going down this path of becoming a death doula. And maybe for clarification, we could start with, what is a death doula?
Yeah.
And why is it important? Like, what is it, and what is that service?
So I love how my friends call it death doula. They just lean into the death doula.
Death.
Yeah, it's a bit of a charged word. So
transformation doula.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a birth doula would be too. Is there for people at those pivotal moments of life and death. I've come to call it end of life doula because it's a little softer. And I think
That
it
is softer.
encompasses more than just that moment of death too, because end of life doula is someone who would help in pre-planning, in speaking about your wishes, like what do you want to happen once you've passed and you can't speak for yourself anymore? Do you have certain wishes around where you want to be buried, or do you want to be cremated? Do you have hard beliefs around that you don't want to be cremated? So it's having those conversations before the moment happens, and then helping families plan for that, so that when it happens, they're not just scrambling, because it's really hard to, plan a funeral and plan.
So it's like a third party coming in to really ease this thing, especially in the West. Then this is not is this a thing in other places?
Well, it's actually a very old profession. Like people would have done it for eons, but it just never had a title to it.
Right.
Because part of the role is also sitting with people at that portal.
Right.
But it's not necessarily just that. The scope of practice is wider than that. But I think, every end of life doula would have their things, their services that they do want to offer that they don't. But yeah, what I'm probably most excited about in that path is to be there and to provide that comfort, especially for people who might not have family, or it can be a lot. It can be overwhelming for families to constantly be with somebody at bedside. So it just provides a little bit of relief. And for me, I also love to sing. So that's, what I want to provide people, because I think I just know what it's like to be cradled by someone's voice, and there's nothing that compares as far as soothing the soul. So just helping that transition so that it's a little bit less riddled with fear. And
if you can do the death work long before you're on your deathbed.
Exactly.
I think is the best remedy. I tell people, do those contemplations when you're young and healthy.
Exactly. Because there's so many things that I think people come to realize when they're at that threshold that they wish they knew before. Yeah. And then they're filled with regret, or if they had a do-over, they would do it differently. So I think being able to contemplate that while you still have a lot of life can inform on how you want to live, so that you don't have those regrets when you get to that phase of life. So that's what I love to teach about, and have people to contemplate and lean into that discomfort of we're not here forever. And but then I had a dream when I can't really place it in my timeline, but I was probably late teens, and it was a dream where I died and I popped out of the atmosphere, and I was staring down at Earth, and it was very clear where I had a choice to come back and live another cycle, or I could move on and go explore somewhere else. And then that just softened everything for me, of this life doesn't matter, in the sense of I don't need to do everything I want to do in this lifetime. There's going to be time to do those things.
So it elongated your time horizon.
Yeah, but also to not be frivolous with it, though. It doesn't mean that you can just waste your life. Don't do that either.
The middle path.
But you can soften into your existence and your purpose. I think when a lot of us are young, we're we want to change the world, and we just we want to achieve this greater purpose, and that's great to have that drive, but you can just, that drive sometimes even creates this anxiety or this contraction, because there's fear of, if you don't fulfill it, then what? But it's it's okay.
We've actually talked a lot about the whole fix the world paradigm, where it's almost positioned in our culture, I'm going to fix the world or save someone or save a whole group.
Yeah.
And where that leads people and yourself if you get fixed into it.
Yeah. And how I've come to understand it is, no one's going to change the world. No one takes the world like it's an immovable object and moves it and changes it. It's already changing. It's already a river. All you can choose is where do you want to be in that river? If you want to be a stone in the river, and then allow for the flow to move a certain way.
Yeah.
But even any changes that you influence aren't going to be permanent. So,
yeah. Whatever you create, is also going to atrophy. Sorry.
Yeah. But that is the purpose of life, though, is to create order out of chaos. And so, we absolutely do have an influence. It's not that we don't create change and we don't create ripples. And
so it's both, like you always say.
Always both.
Always both.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's the name of the podcast. Yeah. Always both with Jen.
The paradox. Yeah. Yeah, I love paradoxes, as you know.
Yeah, and I wasn't actually going to ask you about it, but now I feel called to. But I want to ask you about your music.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because along with what you were talking about, the end of life doula and like being with people at the end, and what you could, one of the services you do and can offer is like sound and sound healing, because that's a beautiful thing to experience. And if you're going to go, if it's the end, like going out with the right frequencies and the right harmonics inside of you is beautiful and important. But you don't do that. You don't do your music just for that. You do it in all sorts of capacities now. And I know that you've talked about just like, maybe I should just step fully into music.
Yeah.
Tell me about your relationship to music and sound.
Yeah, I've come to define it. It's hard to define too, but that I'm not so much a performer, but I'm there to create experiences for people. So I do a lot of sound baths where, people can relax into an experience, or it's more of a sound meditation or a journey, to create those altered states of consciousness where perhaps you have a download or some information that doesn't happen in your regular waking life. And
it's like an activator.
Yeah. And sound, like we're all vibration, and sound is also vibration. And so I think it's amazing because there's really no side effect to it. Like there's no way to create a lot of harm. With sound, like I just thought of a really terrible singer. Like even if they're out of harmony, it's not gonna create disease. It's quite a safe modality to explore that. And I have a hard time saying it's sound healing, though, just because of the word healer has a lot of weight to it, and I think.
What resonates more then?
A sound. I create sound experiences or sound journeys. I would say it's more of a sound journey. Because I think
what's wrong with healer? Sorry.
Well, so there's nothing wrong with it. If people love to use that word, that's fine. I feel like you're not the healer. Like you can work with somebody, but they need to heal themselves, and you can guide them to a certain state, but they have to do that work to maintain that state.
Yeah.
So you can for sure serve them and help them in a way. But you can't heal anybody.
Healing's really popular these days.
It's very popular.
It's really in.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think it's overused sometimes. But maybe that's my own stuff to work through.
Hold on. Give me a second with healer. I am a healer. So that's kind of how someone would identify with it. Like, what do you do? And you're like, I'm a healer.
Yeah.
So the trap is maybe not trap, but you don't want to get into that. Like, I am a healer, I'm going to heal you. It's like, I'm a healer because that's a convenient way to explain it in language. Yeah. But knowing that I open space for you to heal yourself. Exactly.
And I think it comes to that, what I learned from along the way is the fixing, helping, and serving, and the differences between those. And fixing is seeing somebody is broken. And you never want to work with anybody in that.
If that's how their paradigm is looking at it.
Yeah. Like you don't like, oh, you're broken. Like, let me fix you.
Because I'm a healer.
Because then that actually, I think that just reinforces the broken aspect of that person. And I can't even say the broken aspect, because I think everyone is whole already. Again, it's those lost parts that maybe they've forgotten and you need to call back. And then helping is kind of seeing somebody as inferior and you're superior. So, let me help you out. But serving is recognizing someone's wholeness and then communicating with them from that place. And then that allows them to rise. And I think we've all had teachers where like, they see something in me before you even see it in yourself. And then that's when you grow up to match that, right? But it's
right.
Like
it's the whole namaste, like I see you.
Yeah, exactly. I see the light in you. I see your wholeness. I see your perfection. And sure, you've got these things, but let's work on your wholeness. Actually, let's work on radiating that part out so that it can encompass all of the other parts.
Yeah.
And then you're whole.
Yeah. And even like the word service, which all of my teachers, every teacher I've ever had, like service, just the word tends to be the centerpiece of everything. Mm-hmm. And to me, what it's come to feel like is like service is the ability to like just be me at my fullest expression. Yeah. Like I want to be around groups where I can fully be me, which is the form of service. So knowing who I am and like what I'm gifted with so that I can use those gifts, because that's so enjoyable. It's so fulfilling to use the tools that you were given. Yeah. And as you gather back all the shadow aspects of yourself, it makes it easier to use the gifts. And sometimes those little shadow aspects become
your gift.
Yeah, they can become your gift. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. And I think it becomes effortless when you're aligned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you done much recording you've done some recording. I know you wanted to step a lot more into recording your music and your voice, because you have an insanely beautiful voice.
Thank you.
You're always all humble about you and your voice. Oh, yeah. But you have an amazing voice for singing.
Yeah, thank you. I do want to record more, and it's like there's just so much to do with there's so many ways to go about it, and like where do I actually want to take it is.
Would you make an album?
Yeah, but again, it's like I want to create more experiences for people. So how? Yeah, I do. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with my music yet, but I know it's somewhere. But I mean, I regularly sing.
Yin and sound, Shala Yoga, for anyone who's living in Squamish.
Yeah, I do yin and sound every week. And I was hosting sound baths before, even out of our home. And it's just something that I realize, like, whatever you're gifted at, it is your duty in this life to use it. That's, and I there's a story my friend, when I was a teenager, her dad told me, and I was 14 years old, and it just stuck with me, because he said that God gave a man one single gift, and the guy didn't use it. And so he took away his gift and gave it to the guy who has 10. And at the end of his life, the guy's like, what? Why would you take my one single gift and give it to the one who has 10? He has 10. He doesn't need mine. And he said, well, the one who has 10 uses all of them. And that always stuck with me, of like, yeah, whatever you're gifted at, you have to use it. And I also think about, like, what if I'm born next lifetime and I don't have a voice? Like, that would suck. So I'm gonna use it in this lifetime, and I'm sure next time it'll be another gift. But you got to make sure that you use what you have.
I've heard a similar story from an old mentor named Jim Rohn, which he's like the godfather of personal development, right, to Tony Robbins and all of them. But he uses the example of, like, there's 3 men, and he gives each of them a gift. And the first guy goes and he takes his gift and he buries it in the backyard.
Oh, yeah.
And then he comes and he checks in to make sure it's still there. And then the next guy, I don't even actually remember the whole story, but the one other guy, he takes his gift and he multiplies his gift, and he turns his gift into 2 gifts, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And then there's a third guy, and I forget what he does, but he's the one who they took his gift away.
Right.
But it's funny. The one that's funny about it, I find, is the one who you know your gift,
but you hide it,
and then you come check on it and make sure it's still around, but you're not cultivating it. You're not using it.
Yeah.
You've put it in the closet.
Yeah.
Where it's nice and safe. It's
Yeah.
safe there, and I know where it is.
Yeah.
But I'm not willing to like go and use it and damage the. I don't want to screw with it.
Right. But it gets amplified when you use it.
Yeah, and it's gonna get some damage. It's like any tool. Yeah. You get I get a new piece of climbing gear. It's really nice when it's all shiny right out of the box, but I got to go take it out climbing, and within a couple weeks, it's gonna have all sorts of scars on it, and like it's gonna get a little bit screwed up.
I think it's different with your gifts.
It's different with your gifts, but it's a more well-rounded, like, the whole thing develops when you use it.
Totally. Yeah. You get better at it. You get more refined. Yeah.
What's your gift?
One of them.
I know you've got a few. I know you have a few, but.
Well, one of them is singing. I think in general, it's holding space. And
I was going to say that's your gift for sure.
Yeah. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think
holding space is very popular these days too.
What is it? Healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is holding space all about?
I think it's allowing people to show up and be human in all of their colors, and for a safe space where there's no judgment. And a lot of times people just need to be witnessed. Like they don't need advice, they don't need feedback,
just to be seen.
They just need to be heard, they just need to be witnessed, and then that can dissolve that issue.
Why does that work so well? That's what I've learned too, and this year especially, that's really become quite evident, that when nature is seen and witnessed, it changes everything. Mm-hmm. Why is it? That's amazing. It's like the mechanics of it anyway. The charge dissolves.
Yeah.
You saw me. Someone saw me.
I think it's feeling understood, feeling less alone, feeling like you're not crazy for feeling whatever you're feeling.
It's not irrational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That there's, like normalizing what's happening to you. Your response to it is natural and normal, and it's not a flaw, so
simple. Just let people, bringing humans together to be humans.
Yeah. And like recognizing that we're experiencing being human. And
yeah, we are.
Yeah.
Sure are.
And it's not always easy. It's not always an easy ride.
So, speaking of not an easy ride, how's your first year in business been?
Well,
you're a first year entrepreneur as of what? A few weeks ago?
A month ago, yeah.
You stepped into the entrepreneurial path.
Yeah.
So now all my best friends are in there. I've done that. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yoga studio owner. Do retreats. You do independent sessions with people. You do a lot of stuff actually. But,
yeah.
I guess more the yoga retreat studio is what I think.
Yeah, the yoga studio was.
And you bought it during COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was kind of a point where it was either I take it over or we might risk losing the longest standing studio in 𝗤𝗏𝗏. And it's not necessarily something that I was looking for at that time. But it was, again, something that it actually came up because I was just out doing my thing and giving my offerings. And
what were you doing before? I forgot. You were making jewelry, like cool jewelry and stuff.
Yeah, I was making jewelry. I've had odd jobs here and there. I would do kirtans in the park. I would do sound baths. I don't know. Honestly,
it's kind of entrepreneurial, I'd say.
Yeah, I've always kind of had my own things going. Like like I have told you before, I've never really worried about money from quite a while ago, because even when I was like, had nothing, there just something weird would happen. Like someone would call me to rent my car, which doesn't happen ever, but just like when I need it. Yeah, just when I need it, someone wants to borrow my car and wants to give me money for it, or someone will call out of nowhere and want a painting when I'm like struggling to sell paintings on a good day. But then when I really need it, it just...
Oh yeah, you're like an amazing painter.
It happens, yeah. Yeah. So I haven't worried about money much, but somehow I always have enough. I always have what I need, and
Sounds good. I mean, I need a new camera. If you don't have problems with money, maybe you could.
Well.
Okay, yes. I'll buy the camera. Okay.
It's a perspective.
You could buy me a tea.
I'll buy you tea. Yeah. I mean, it is working on having enough abundance that it can overflow, but, yeah, I think that's what I was doing that before, but I was doing a kirtan in the park. And then that's when the owner of Shala, the previous owner, she came, and then she kind of planted that seed of how that could work and I could take it over. And
so she came to you.
She came to me.
Be like, maybe you would buy my business.
Yeah, I was teaching there before, and then she got shut down, and then it was shut for about a year because even though she could reopen, she just didn't have the capacity to anymore. And she really got rocked during COVID. So, she was just drained because it was a lot of like up and down and uncertainty. And yeah, so she kind of planted the seed. But again, it was like, if I wasn't out there offering what I'm offering, I don't think that conversation would have come up. So it was just like, just keep offering from your heart, and then things do align. And yeah, looking back, I'm like, how did that even happen for me?
Offering from the heart. When you just said that, it resonated a lot with me, because when I think of all of my teachers, that's how I feel about them. What they do, how they serve, is just like their businesses. Their entrepreneurial endeavor is straight out. It's right from the heart. And that's what I want to be more embody more of that as well. Mm-hmm. So maybe we could talk about that journey, like as entrepreneurs, learning to be heart-centric, which is, I think, the biggest trend on the planet that is happening and needs to happen. Yeah. Is learning to actually engage in our whole economic system from a heart-centric place. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're doing with Shala Yoga. Yeah.
It's again coming back to that service, and like, how do you want to serve the world, and how do you want to, I think, again, coming back to our gifts too, is I think recognizing that and working with your gifts, because that informs probably how you will have impact. Is what are you gifted at? And then, I mean, as long as you like what you're gifted at, you might be gifted at something that you actually hate doing, but
is that possible? Can we hate our gifts? I guess we could.
I think so. Yeah. I think you could be really good at something, but just don't want to do it.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Usually we like doing things we're good at.
True. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But not always.
Not always. Like, I'm pretty good at math, but I would not want to be an accountant.
But you can use math for a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, I ended up doing a lot of math. Yeah. But yeah, I think like when you can align with your heart center and allow that to drive you, I think it becomes like the long hours of entrepreneurship become less something to
dreadful.
Yeah, dreadful. That's the word. Thank you. Because there's a fuel, because it's something that you love and you're passionate at. And I understand it's really hard for some people to find what that is. It takes years sometimes. But I think it's exploring. It's trying different things. It's, again, like maybe exploring, what are you good at? What are you naturally gifted at? And and being willing to quit too, like quitting things that aren't working for you. And I think we were talking about that at breakfast this morning too, this like the sunk cost fallacy, where you've invested so much time into something that you don't want to walk away from it, because then you lost all the time that you invested. But
right,
it doesn't work like that, because if you learned lessons along the way, nothing is lost.
No.
But you're losing out if it's actually not in alignment for you, but you keep going down that road, then you're actually losing out on a whole lot that you're not then aligning yourself to.
Then you're learning a deeper lesson of pain.
It's a lot of pain.
Keep going.
Yeah. And I think that's the most painful is when we're doing things, and it's a perception too. Like, we often, I think, want to align our vocation with our livelihood and like our heart-centered offerings to be what makes us money. And sometimes that's great, but sometimes actually it's nice to have a day job and just take care of the bills, and then you can really offer from your heart, because you're not relying on that for money. So, do
you think that's such an old debate? I've been talking about this forever.
Yeah.
Do you think on average it's better for more people to have it aligned, the monetization and the heart-centered, or do you think it works better for a lot of people to have it?
I think there's just case by case. There's no way of knowing, and sometimes there's no way of knowing until you try it.
Yeah.
I like back in my visual art days, like I painted and I loved it, and then as soon as I put the pressure on to make money out of my art, then my art actually suffered, because it was creating from a different place. It wasn't just what I want to create. It was creating from what will people like and buy. And then,
because you have to align it with the market.
Exactly. And so, yeah, sometimes you have to make that choice as an artist of do you want to make a living, or do you want to just do it because you love it? And
good thing yoga is trending.
Yoga is trending.
Yoga asana is trending well in the marketplace.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to do is go beyond the asana. So it's not just the physical practice.
That's right. That's why I like your studio.
Yeah, thanks.
Finally bought a pass.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's I think it's trying things, it's failing, and it's not putting that pressure on it to have your passions provide for you monetarily. And I think, again, it's that perspective shift. Like when I did my first teacher training, the very first weekend, I was working in catering, and I thought that I would probably come back after that weekend and just hate my job even more, because I felt like it wasn't really aligned with what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
But it was the opposite. I went back and I just loved it, because I was more present with it. I was more present with that point in my journey, because I knew that it wouldn't be forever. It's going to change. And, when you look back at like, even your like, teenage years or university years or whatever, young adulthood, like there's times in there where you're like, that there was suffering in there because you had a lot of things that you didn't have figured out. But then when looking back now, you're like, oh, but there was a lot of beautiful parts about it.
Yeah.
That you kind of miss. So it's like, there's always beauty in every moment. And it's just being present to that wherever you are in the journey. And it's just wherever you're at right now in your journey is where you're at in your journey. And
with where you are in your entrepreneurial journey, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs? That anyone that's about to potentially going to step into that path. What's good advice for early entrepreneurs?
I think give yourself a lot of time to figure it out. Like, don't think that you need to have all your systems right away to start on the path. And just like, I gave myself a year I'm probably not going to take any vacation for at least a year, because I need to,
wise.
Yeah, because I need to just like figure that out. But then another piece of advice was plan a vacation so that it forces you to put those systems in place so that you can create some leverage for yourself. But it's that patience and that being willing to work hard at the beginning. Like I not only in my first year of entrepreneurship with yoga, with the studio, but I also taught a teacher training, and I also taught medicine wheel. And
You're intense.
it was a lot. So it was a lot. Like I had to really increase my capacity to work and to hold space and now I've completed those cycles, the teacher training, and there'll be a next one. But now in this time right now, all I have to do is focus on the studio, and it feels so easy because it's very simple, yet there's always things that are happening, and I'm still working a lot, all relative, but it just feels easy in comparison to having so much more to worry about. So I think it's like I think to find that flow of like, push that edge of your capacity to see how much you can work, see how much is manageable for you, and then find that edge and then just step back a little bit. And then you'll get in your flow where it feels like it's manageable and you're finding balance. But you don't really know what that is until you really push yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like both your original pieces of advice. In my first year, a couple of years of business, I had a coach right from the beginning when I started in entrepreneurship. And right from the start, we had a scheduled retreat where you're not able to have contact with any of your employees or anyone in the business.
Right.
Cell phones away, and it's your first year. So like you said, it's really nice to have like, okay, I'm going to work really hard, and I accept that I'm about to get owned potentially.
Yep.
In like my capacity and like just really working long days and all that stuff. But at the same time, I've also planned in a blackout period.
Yeah.
Where I'm going to have time just for me. So I have to actually make sure the things are in place for that too.
Yeah. And you have that to look forward to as well.
It's cool that you're coming to those same conclusions, because I would have said similar things.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
But then, like we were talking about today, I think we glorify entrepreneurship when we're not there. But it's a lot sometimes. Like you constantly have something to do. Constantly you have something to think about. You can't just leave work and it's gone unless you have like really good discipline. And I'm working on that, like that structure. But like it just comes back to enjoying where you're at. Because sometimes I'm like, I wish I had a simple job where I'm told what to do. I don't have to think.
But do you?
No, clearly not, because that's not where I am. So part of me wants this more. But yeah, it's still, like I said earlier, you can appreciate where you're at in your journey because it's your journey and it's not going to be there forever. Like, I don't know if I'm going to have this yoga studio forever.
I don't know if I'm going to have this podcast forever.
Yeah. Well, it's digital, so it's going to be on there forever.
Okay, the episodes that are recorded will be stored on YouTube forever.
Yeah, probably.
But it is that back to the impermanence. Back to where we started. Yeah. Everything has a course, a lifespan. Yeah. Before it transitions and changes. Yeah. Yeah, which is why I'm glad I got you on the podcast.
Yeah. Before our lifespan's over.
Huh? Before our lifespan's over. Yeah, we've probably covered at least an hour, I think, here. Yeah. And I got to go get on a ferry tonight because I'm going over to the island for a peyote ceremony.
All right.
So I'm going to go and spend some time alone. And
alone with people.
Yeah, alone with people. Well, no, I'm going down alone. I'm going to spend some time on the water. Nice. I'm actually rereading the medicine wheel training. Nice. Right now. So I just started again on the south. But I'm actually looking really forward to not being around people because we've been hosting lots of stuff. Yeah. Which you know about because you've been hosting them with me.
Yeah. Alone time is good for that recalibration. And I think it's like what you're asking of how do you know what to offer is you do have to spend time alone and that self-inquiry. Yeah. Because you can have a lot of people, like I think you learn what your gifts are by reflections of other people, for sure.
Totally.
But then you do have to be alone to be willing to listen, and what's that heart's call. And if you're constantly busy in your mind, you're not going to hear that heart call.
Well, now I'm looking really forward to the ceremony because I want to go and tune into my heart.
Nice.
And that's what peyote is. It's a very heart-centered medicine.
Yeah.
So I'm actually looking really forward to that. And last time we did a peyote ceremony, which you were there for, it was our whole community, like a huge, there was probably like 10 or 12 of us. So it's like, wasn't exactly alone.
Yeah.
So this one will be a little bit more, I have time for myself.
Nice.
To really tune into the heart.
Yeah.
If someone wanted to get a hold of you, would you want them to?
That's a good question.
Would you even want them to get a hold of you? Or is it just like come out to Shala? Or maybe just for clarity, what are your offerings? And we can put links in the link below of this podcast.
Yeah. I mean,
what are your offerings? And
it's hard, right? 'Cause I'm like a lot of us are very multifaceted. So I have a lot of different offerings. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for, which service. But for yoga, 𝗟𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗀𝗢𝗀. For end of life doula, I have �lovingends.com. So all my services are on there. And then my Instagram, 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗏. And I'm not very good at posting on there consistently.
So come practice yoga, basically.
Come practice yoga. Come be in a sound bath if you want. Or, And
I know you'll be doing a retreat in 2023. You're going to start on the retreats path a little bit more.
Yeah.
You were going to do one this year. What was the title for what was the essence of the one you were about to do?
It's called Light of Darkness. So next year it's going to be November 1st to November 5th, 2023. And we're going to experience Dia de Muertos together. So it's Day of the Dead. So it's a really rich Mexican tradition that I haven't actually been in Mexico for. But I'm co-hosting it with Lorena, who is Mexican, and she's just so great. We taught medicine or the teacher training together. And so it's a lot of contemplations that we were talking about, like how do you contemplate your own impermanence, and how does that give you access to embracing this life more fully and being more present. And so we have some shamanic journeying, some yoga, some sound meditations, cacao ceremony and fire ceremony, and a lot of things. Yeah. I'm doing a little dance.
All the fun stuff.
But yeah, so the retreat is on shalayoga.ca too.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Cool. If any of that's interesting, those links are below. Highly recommended. Jen has been a great teacher for me. And thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks. Next time we'll talk about your experience with medicine wheel.
I can summarize it, but how would I summarize my experience with medicine wheel? I feel like I now have a map.
Yeah.
And it's nice to have a map when you're on a journey.
Yeah.
So, so I feel like I've got a nice map.
Nice.
And I'm just like,
Nice.
going along.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
Amazing.
Yeah. You want a hug?
Yeah.
Good podcast.